June 6, 1944, 7:25 a.m. Dog White Sector, Omaha Beach, Normandy. The salt spray mixed with blood as Brigadier General Norman Cota pressed himself against the shingle, his uniform already soaked through with seawater and sweat. Through the deafening cacophony of machine gun fire and exploding mortars, he scribbled a single line in his waterproof notebook with a trembling hand. The plan has failed. Everything we prepared for is wrong. Now we must create victory from disaster. Through binoculars raised cautiously above the seawall, he witnessed something that contradicted every assurance given by Allied command. The beach was a killing field, the naval bombardment had failed, and American soldiers were being systematically slaughtered. The 51-year-old general watched as the pride of American youth died in the sand, their bodies washing back and forth in the crimson tide. In the pre-dawn briefing aboard USS Charles Carroll, Cota had warned his staff about confusion. But this wasn't confusion. This was annihilation. The vaunted Atlantic Wall hadn't been neutralized. The German defenders weren't demoralized conscripts, but battle-hardened veterans of the 352nd Infantry Division. The promised crater holes for cover didn't exist. The beach was completely exposed, offering no protection from the murderous crossfire that swept across every inch of sand. 2,400 American soldiers would become casualties in the first 2 hours at Omaha Beach. The mathematics of defeat were being written in blood across 300 yards of open sand. What none of them knew was that this moment would trigger the most remarkable battlefield reversal in modern military history. The conversion of certain defeat into decisive victory through the actions of one man who refused to accept failure. The disaster had been months in the making, hidden beneath layers of optimistic planning and overconfident assumptions. As a major advisor in Operation Overlord, Cota had been made the Assistant Division Commander of the 29th Infantry Division, which was designated to land at Omaha Beach. The 29th, a National Guard formation nicknamed the Blue and Grey for its composition of units from both Union and Confederate states, had never seen combat. They would be landing alongside the battle-tested 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, in what planners assured would be a straightforward assault against demoralized defenders. But Cota knew better. A year before the invasion, at the Conference on Landing Assaults, he had argued passionately against the daylight landing plan. It is granted that strategical surprise will be impossible to attain. Tactical surprise is another thing, however. Tactical surprise is one of the most powerful factors in determining success. I therefore favour the night landing. I do not believe the daylight assault can succeed. His warnings had been dismissed. The High Command, intoxicated by their superiority in numbers and firepower, believed that naval bombardment and aerial bombing would pulverize German defences. They promised the assault troops that they would walk ashore against minimal resistance. Intelligence reports suggested only second-rate troops defended Omaha. The 716th Static Division, composed of older men and foreign conscripts. The reality was catastrophically different. Unknown to Allied intelligence, the veteran 352nd Infantry Division had moved into the Omaha sector just weeks before the invasion. These were not garrison troops, but combat veterans from the Eastern Front, equipped with 88mm guns, multiple mortar batteries, and interlocking fields of machine gun fire that covered every inch of the beach. Among the assault troops was Private Harold Baumgarten of Company B, 116th Infantry Regiment, 29th Division. A 19-year-old from New York City, he had joined the National Guard to escape the tedium of civilian life. Now, packed into a landing craft with 30 other men, he watched the French coast grow larger through the grey dawn light. The naval bombardment that was supposed to last until H hour had already stopped. The beach ahead looked pristine, untouched, a very bad sign. Sergeant Robert Slaughter, Company D, 116th Infantry, remembered the final briefing. They told us it would be a walkover. The Air Force would bomb the hell out of them, the Navy would blast them to kingdom come, and we'd just walk in and mop up. Some of the boys were actually disappointed. They thought they'd missed the real fighting. Captain Charles Cawthon, commanding Company K, 116th Infantry, had been more sceptical. A college-educated Virginian who had risen through the National Guard ranks, he recognized the hallmarks of overconfidence. The planning was too precise, the timetables too rigid, the assumptions too optimistic. War, he knew from his study of military history, never went according to plan. At 6:30 a.m., H-hour, the first wave hit the beach. Within seconds, the carefully orchestrated plan disintegrated into chaos. German machine guns, untouched by the failed bombardment, opened fire from concealed positions in the bluffs. The 88mm guns, invisible from the sea, began their deadly work. Company A, 116th Infantry, landing at Dog Green sector directly in front of the Vierville draw, ceased to exist as a fighting unit within 10 minutes. Of the 230 men in the company, only 18 would survive the day unscathed. Their company commander, Captain Taylor Fellers, was killed before he reached the sand. His second-in-command lasted 30 seconds longer. Private Baumgarten's landing craft took a direct hit from an 88mm shell 50 yards from shore. The explosion threw bodies and body parts across the compartment. Baumgarten, miraculously unhurt, found himself in water over his head, weighed down by 60 pounds of equipment. He stripped off his pack, inflated his life vest, and struggled toward shore. Machine gun bullets whipped the water around him. The man to his left had his head blown off. The man to his right simply disappeared beneath the waves. On Dog White sector, where Cota would land, Company C, 116th Infantry, lost half its strength before reaching the seawall. Men who made it across the 300 yards of open beach arrived without weapons, without ammunition, without officers, without hope. They pressed themselves against the 4-foot-high pile of stones that provided the only cover, and waited to die. The Rangers of the 5th Battalion, elite assault troops trained for exactly this kind of operation, fared no better. Lieutenant Colonel Max Schneider, the battalion commander, watched his lead companies get torn apart attempting to assault the bluffs. The Rangers had been trained to never stop moving, to assault through anything. But this was beyond anything they had prepared for. At 7:25 a.m., Cota landed with part of the 116th Infantry Regiment in the second wave at Dog White sector. His LCVP landing craft came under heavy machine gun fire as well as mortar and artillery fire. 3 soldiers were killed immediately upon exiting the craft. The general was likely the oldest man to set foot on Omaha Beach that day. He was certainly the highest-ranking officer present in those crucial early hours. What Cota saw defied every prediction made by the planners. Dead and wounded American soldiers lay sprawled on the sand and floating in the water. Discarded weapons, life vests and personal effects were strewn about, and disabled tanks burned fiercely. Of the 29 amphibious Sherman tanks launched from the 741st Tank Battalion, 27 had sunk in the rough seas. The survivors were burning wrecks on the beach. But worse than the physical destruction was the psychological collapse. The soldiers huddled by the seawall were inert, leaderless, and almost incapable of action, their weapons fouled by sand and water, and their resolve shaken by the horrors they had seen. These weren't cowards. They were young men who had been thrown into a situation that bore no resemblance to their training or expectations. Cota's aide, Lieutenant Jack Shea, stayed close to the general as they moved along the seawall. Shea, a 24-year-old from Tennessee, had been with Cota since England. He had never seen the general hesitate, but now Cota stood still for a long moment, absorbing the magnitude of the disaster. Then, without warning, he stood up. He just stood up, Shea would later recall. In the middle of all that fire, he just stood up and started walking along the beach like he was on a Sunday stroll. I thought he'd lost his mind. What happened next would become military legend. With complete disregard for his own safety, General Cota moved up and down the fire-swept beach, reorganizing units and coordinating their action. But he did more than reorganize. He galvanized defeated men into fighters through the sheer force of his presence. Finding a group of Rangers pinned down near the seawall, Cota asked their unit. When told they were 5th Rangers, he made the statement that would become the Rangers' eternal motto. Rangers, lead the way. To another group of paralyzed soldiers, he delivered words that would echo through military history. Gentlemen, we are being killed on the beaches. Let us go inland and be killed. The dark humour cut through their paralysis. If they were going to die anyway, better to die trying than cowering. But Cota didn't just give speeches. When he found a captain uncertain how to assault a German strongpoint, he personally demonstrated the technique. I'll tell you what, Captain. You and your men start shooting at them. I'll take a squad of men, and you and your men watch carefully. I'll show you how to take a house with Germans in it. After successfully clearing the position, he returned to the captain. Do you understand? Do you know how to do it now? I won't be around to do it for you again. I can't do it for everybody. Private First Class Charles Neighbour of Company C, 116th Infantry, witnessed Cota's impact on the battlefield. We were done, finished. Guys were crying, praying, trying to dig holes in the shingle with their helmets. Then this general comes walking in the middle of all that fire. He's smoking a cigarette like he's at a garden party. He looks at us and says, "What are you doing lying there? Now let's get the hell out of here." The psychological impact was immediate. If a general could walk upright through that fire, what excuse did enlisted men have for cowering? One by one, then in groups, men began to stand up. At 7:50 a.m., Cota led the charge off Dog White between strongpoints WN68 and WN70 by forcing gaps in the wire with a Bangalore torpedo and wire cutters. The first man through the gap was immediately killed by machine gun fire. The men behind him froze. Cota realized he had to act. He leaped up, dashing across the road and through the gap. The sight of a general officer personally leading the assault electrified the men. They surged after him up the bluff into the teeth of German fire. Sergeant Jack Richardson of the 5th Rangers remembered, "We'd been trained to be tough, to never quit. But that beach broke us. We were ready to quit." Then this old man, he seemed ancient to us, goes charging up the bluff like he's 20 years old. What could we do but follow? 20 minutes later, the 5th Rangers joined the advance and blew more openings. By 9 a.m., more than 600 American troops had reached the top of the bluff opposite Dog White and were advancing inland. The breakthrough wasn't a single dramatic moment, but a series of small victories. A machine gun nest silenced here, a minefield crossed there. Each success built on the previous one. Men who had been paralyzed with fear an hour earlier were now attacking German positions with desperate courage. Cota's breakthrough at Dog White triggered a psychological ripple across Omaha Beach. Word spread along the seawall. Someone had made it up the bluff. If one group could do it, others could too. On Easy Red Sector, Colonel George Taylor of the 16th Infantry Regiment, 1st Division, inspired by reports of Cota's breakthrough, rallied his men with his own immortal words. There are two kinds of people who are staying on this beach, those who are dead and those who are going to die. Now let's get the hell out of here. Small groups of soldiers, often led by junior officers and NCOs, began infiltrating up the bluffs at multiple points. They didn't follow the planned routes. Those were death traps. Instead, they created their own paths, blowing gaps in wire, clearing mines with bayonets, climbing the bluffs like mountain goats. Technical Sergeant William Wiedefeld of the 116th Infantry described the shift. It was like watching men come back from the dead. 1 minute they're beaten, finished. The next minute they're fighting like demons, all because one general showed them it could be done. The reversal of Omaha Beach can only be understood through the eyes of those who lived it. Each man experienced his own journey from defeat to victory, but all were united by the singular presence of Dutch Cota. Private First Class Felix Branham, Company K, 116th Infantry, I was lying behind a dead soldier, using his body for cover. I'd given up. I was just waiting for my turn to die. Then I see this general walking along the beach. He stops right in front of me and says, "Son, you're not doing any good there. Let's go kill some Germans. How do you say no to that?" Sergeant Lawrence Fitzsimmons, 5th Rangers. We were Rangers, elite troops, best of the best, but that beach broke us. We'd lost half our officers in the first 10 minutes. Then Cota shows up and says we should lead the way. It wasn't just an order, it was a challenge. He was saying, "You call yourselves Rangers? Prove it." And by God we did. Captain Joseph Dawson, Company G, 16th Infantry. I'd gotten my company up the bluff on the eastern end of the beach. We were the first ones up, but we were isolated, taking heavy fire. Then we saw troops coming up to our west, Cota's breakthrough. Suddenly we weren't alone anymore. The whole beach was moving. Lieutenant Walter Taylor, Company B, 116th Infantry. My company had ceased to exist. I had maybe 20 men left out of 200. We were finished. Then Cota appears and says, "Lieutenant, get these men moving." I said, "General, we've lost all our officers, most of our NCOs, and our weapons are full of sand." He looked at me and said, "Lieutenant, I don't care if you have to throw rocks at them. Get moving." So we did. The juxtaposition between plan and reality, between defeat and victory, defined D-Day at Omaha Beach. The plan: naval bombardment would create massive craters for cover. The reality: the beach was completely flat and exposed. The plan: bombing would destroy German positions. The reality: cloud cover caused bombers to drop their loads inland, missing every target. The plan: DD tanks would provide covering fire from the water. The reality: 27 of 29 tanks sank in rough seas. The plan: second-rate garrison troops would offer token resistance. The reality: the veteran 352nd Infantry Division was waiting. The plan: assault troops would advance on schedule up marked routes. The reality: every planned route was a killing field. The expectation: generals would command from ships offshore. The reality: Cota personally led the assault up the bluffs. The psychological journey of the assault troops followed a clear progression. 6:30 a.m. Confidence: the bombardment will have destroyed everything. 6:45 a.m. Shock: nothing has been touched. We're being slaughtered. 7 a.m. Despair: this is impossible. We're all going to die. 7:30 a.m. Paralysis: there's nothing we can do but wait to die. 8 a.m. Inspiration: if that general can do it, so can we. 8:30 a.m. Determination: we're going up that bluff or die trying. 9 a.m. Breakthrough: we're actually doing it, we're winning. Evidence anchoring: the reversal of disaster into victory can be measured in concrete numbers. 6:30 a.m. 0 Americans off the beach. 7:30 a.m. 100 men huddled at seawall. 8 a.m. first penetration of bluffs. 9 a.m. 600 men atop bluffs. 10 a.m. multiple exits secured. Noon, continuous movement inland. 6 p.m. beachhead secured. Casualties. First wave, 50 to 70% casualties in most units. Company A, 116th Infantry, 96% casualties. Total D-Day Omaha casualties, approximately 2,400. Without Cota's intervention, potentially total failure. German perspective. At 8:35 a.m., the 352nd Infantry Division reported enemy penetrating at Colleville. At 10 a.m., enemy has taken heights at Saint Laurent. At noon, cannot hold without immediate reinforcement. Beyond the tactical victory, Cota's actions revealed profound truths about leadership and human nature. He didn't just issue orders, he shared the danger. He didn't just command, he led by example. When Cota found a wounded soldier unable to move, he didn't step over him. He stopped, despite the fire, and directed medics to the man's position. When he encountered a group of German prisoners, he ensured they were treated properly, even as American bodies littered the beach. When engineers said they lacked explosives to demolish a concrete wall blocking advance, Cota noticed a bulldozer tank loaded with TNT. When no one volunteered to drive it to the wall under fire, he challenged them. "Hasn't anyone got guts enough to drive it down?" A young soldier stepped forward and Cota slapped him on the back. "That's the stuff! God damn it, get moving!" This wasn't reckless bravado, it was calculated leadership. Cota understood that men needed to see courage to find their own. He provided that example repeatedly throughout the terrible morning. Private Robert Sales of the 116th Infantry captured the human dimension. He wasn't a superman. You could see he was scared too. His hands shook when he lit his cigarette. But he did what had to be done anyway. That's what made us follow him. He was scared, but doing it anyway. If he could, we could. The morning of June 6th witnessed the complete collapse of American military doctrine as taught at West Point and the Command and General Staff College. Everything the Army believed about amphibious assaults proved wrong at Omaha Beach. Doctrine: massive firepower preparation ensures success. Reality: firepower failed, human courage succeeded. Doctrine: detailed planning prevents confusion. Reality: plans became irrelevant within minutes. Doctrine: technological superiority guarantees victory. Reality: individual leadership determined outcome. Doctrine: generals command from protected positions. Reality: a general personally leading the assault saved the day. Colonel Charles Canham, commanding the 116th Infantry, himself wounded 4 times during the day, later wrote, "Every tactical manual, every training exercise, every assumption we made was wrong. We succeeded because one general threw away the book and led from the front." The shift was noted even by the Germans. Oberst Ernst Goth, commanding the 916th Grenadier Regiment defending Omaha, reported, "At 0730 the enemy attack was failing. By 900 they had broken through at multiple points. The change was inexplicable. Defeated troops suddenly became aggressive. We learned later a general had personally led the assault. This explains everything." The most remarkable aspect of Cota's performance was revealed only after the war. He had predicted the exact scenario that unfolded. On June 5th, aboard USS Charles Carroll, he had told his staff, "The landing craft aren't going in on schedule, and people are going to be landed in the wrong place. Some won't be landed at all. We must improvise, carry on, not lose our heads." This wasn't pessimism. It was realistic preparation. While other commanders assured their men everything would go perfectly, Cota prepared his for chaos. He had studied every amphibious assault in history. He knew that none had gone according to plan. More remarkably, Cota had specifically trained for this scenario. In England, he had repeatedly practiced what he called broken field running, advancing through unexpected obstacles, adapting to changed circumstances, leading from the front when necessary. He had even practiced the specific technique of blowing gaps in wire under fire, the exact skill needed at Omaha. Lieutenant Jack Shea revealed after the war, "The general had us practice chaos. While everyone else was practicing perfect landings, he had us practice everything going wrong. He'd say, 'What if there's no cover? What if the tanks don't make it? What if you're in the wrong place?' We thought he was crazy. Turns out he was the only sane one." The impact of Cota's actions extended far beyond D-Day itself. The breakthrough at Omaha Beach had strategic implications that shaped the entire European campaign. Immediate impact: Omaha Beach secured by nightfall. 34,000 troops landed despite catastrophic start. Link established between Utah and British beaches. German counterattack prevented. Strategic consequences: Normandy beachhead consolidated. Allied build-up proceeded on schedule. German forces unable to drive Allies into sea. Liberation of France assured. Long-term effects doctrine rewritten to emphasize leadership over firepower. Ranger motto adopted permanently. Personal leadership emphasized in officer training. Flexibility prioritized over rigid planning. On June 29, 1944, Cota was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his superb leadership, personal bravery, and zealous devotion to duty. Many, including historian Stephen Ambrose, argued he deserved the Medal of Honor. A campaign continues to this day to award him this recognition posthumously. But perhaps the most lasting impact was on the men who survived Omaha Beach. Thousands of soldiers owed their lives to Cota's intervention. They returned home, raised families, built careers, and carried with them the lesson learned on that terrible morning. One person's courage can reverse disaster into victory. The reversal of Omaha Beach can be quantified through military records. Before Cota's intervention, 6:30 to 7:30 a.m. 0 penetrations of German defences. 90% of troops pinned at water's edge or seawall. Estimated 40% casualties in first wave. 0 vehicles off the beach. Naval fire support ineffective due to no spotting. Command structure collapsed. After Cota's breakthrough, 8 a.m. to noon, 5 exits opened through bluffs. Continuous stream of troops moving inland. Artillery observers established on heights. Naval gunfire becoming effective. Command structure reconstituted. German defences crumbling. German records 7:35 a.m. Attack repulsed with heavy losses. 8:55 a.m. Enemy infiltrating positions. 10:15 a.m. Cannot hold without reinforcement. 12 p.m. Positions overrun, withdrawing. 50 years later, on June 6, 1994, the few surviving veterans of Omaha Beach returned for the 50th anniversary of D-Day. Among them was Jack Shea, Cota's aide, now 74 years old. Standing on the same beach where he had expected to die, Shea spoke to a gathering of veterans, families, and dignitaries. People ask me what I remember most about D-Day. It wasn't the noise or the death or the fear, though God knows there was plenty of all three. What I remember is one man standing up when everyone else was lying down, one man walking when everyone else was crawling, one man saying, "Follow me," when everyone else was saying, "It's impossible." General Cota didn't win Omaha Beach. We all did. But he showed us how. He showed us that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite fear. He showed us that leadership isn't about giving orders, it's about going first. He showed us that ordinary men can do extraordinary things when someone shows them the way. I'm an old man now. I've lived a full life, marriage, children, grandchildren, a career. None of it would have happened without Dutch Cota. None of us would have made it off that beach. He turned disaster into victory, not through superior firepower or brilliant tactics, but through the oldest military virtues: courage, leadership, and the willingness to share danger with his men. Standing in the cemetery above Omaha Beach, amid 9,387 white crosses and stars of David, Shea concluded, "Each of these markers represents a story ended too soon, but they also represent victory earned through sacrifice." General Cota showed us that from the worst disaster can come the greatest triumph. He taught us that defeat is only final if you accept it. He proved that one person can make the difference between catastrophe and victory. The story of Dutch Cota at Omaha Beach reveals fundamental truths about human nature and leadership that transcend military history. Truth 1. Planning has limits. No matter how detailed the preparation, reality will differ from expectations. The ability to adapt, not the perfection of the plan, determines success. Truth 2. Technology is not decisive. Despite overwhelming material superiority, The Allies nearly failed at Omaha. Human factors, courage, leadership, determination, proved more important than technological advantage. Truth 3. Leadership is physical. In crisis, people need to see leadership, not just hear it. Cota's visible courage changed the battlefield more than any order could have. Truth 4. Individual actions matter. One person's courage can spread through thousands. Cota's example rippled along the beach, inspiring acts of heroism that collectively won the day. Truth 5. Age and rank are irrelevant in crisis. Cota was decades older than most men on the beach. As a general, he could have stayed offshore. Instead, he proved that leadership is about responsibility, not privilege. Today, the reversal of Omaha Beach stands as one of military history's most compelling examples of leadership under fire. Staff colleges worldwide study Cota's actions. The U.S. Army's leadership manual cites his example. The Rangers' motto perpetuates his words. But the legacy extends beyond military circles. Business schools examine his crisis leadership. Historians point to Omaha Beach as proof that individuals shape history. Psychologists study the ripple effect of his courage. The beach itself bears witness to the change. Where machine guns once swept the sand, tourists now walk peacefully. Where men once died by the thousands, children play. Where defeat seemed certain, monuments celebrate victory. At the Normandy American Cemetery, a plaque commemorates Cota's actions. When disaster threatened, one man's courage turned the tide. Simple words for an extraordinary achievement. Veterans of subsequent conflicts, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, have testified to finding inspiration in Cota's example. When faced with impossible situations, they remembered the general who walked upright through machine gun fire, who led from the front, who refused to accept defeat. Colonel Ralph Ingersoll, who landed at Omaha later on D-Day, wrote in his memoir, "The beach was won by the sacrifice of brave men and the leadership of a few extraordinary officers. Chief among them was Dutch Cota. Without him, Omaha would have failed. Without Omaha, the invasion might have failed. Without the invasion, the war would have dragged on for years." One man's courage echoed through history. Military historians have extensively analysed Cota's performance at Omaha Beach. Stephen Ambrose, historian. Cota's performance on D-Day was the single greatest example of battlefield leadership in American military history. He didn't just save Omaha Beach, he showed what leadership means. John Keegan, military historian. Among all the acts of courage on D-Day, Cota's stands supreme. He reversed tactical disaster into strategic victory through personal example. Carlo D'Este, biographer. Cota proved that battles are still won by men, not machines. His leadership was worth divisions of reinforcements. Joseph Balkowski, 29th Division historian. Cota never wavered, never hesitated, never thought twice in his resolve to get his troops off the bloody beaches. The U.S. Army's official history states, "The penetration of the beach defences at Omaha was accomplished by the initiative and courage of small unit leaders and individuals, inspired by the personal leadership of General Cota." The German perspective is equally telling. General der Artillerie Marx, commanding the 84th Corps defending Normandy, reported, "The American attack at Beach 46, Omaha, was initially repulsed with heavy losses. The subsequent breakthrough was unexpected and can only be attributed to exceptional leadership at the tactical level. Beyond medals and monuments, Cota's greatest memorial lives in the institutions he influenced. The U.S. Army's Ranger School, established in 1950, incorporated lessons learned at Omaha Beach. The emphasis on small unit leadership, initiative and adaptability stems directly from D-Day's hard lessons. The Army's Officer Candidate School reformed its curriculum after World War II to emphasize leading from the front. "Follow me," the infantry school's motto, echoes Cota's example. Every young lieutenant learns about the general who personally led the breakthrough at Omaha Beach. Modern military doctrine, emphasizing mission command and decentralized execution, traces its roots to June 6, 1944. The failure of rigid planning and the success of individual initiative at Omaha Beach revolutionized American military thinking. Special operations forces, who pride themselves on flexibility and personal courage, study Cota's actions as the exemplar of their ethos. Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Marine Raiders all learn about the general who embodied their values before their units existed. In 2004, on the 60th anniversary of D-Day, the remaining survivors gathered. Former Sergeant Bob Slaughter, 116th Infantry. I've had 60 years to think about that day. 60 years to wonder why I lived when so many died. The only answer I can find is Dutch Cota. He gave us the courage to do what seemed impossible. Former Captain John Ryan, 5th Rangers. The magnificent leadership of a few officers like General C. put their lives on the line when the chips were down. He saved not just lives but the entire operation. Without his breakthrough, Omaha fails. Former Private Felix Branham, 116th Infantry. I named my first son Norman after General Cota. When people ask why, I tell them, because without Norman Cota, there would be no son to name. Cota's reversal of Omaha Beach carried profound moral weight. In an age of mechanized warfare, he proved that individual character still mattered. In a time of mass destruction, he showed that personal courage could be decisive. His actions raised fundamental questions. What makes men follow a leader into almost certain death? What changes paralyzed troops into aggressive fighters? How does one person's example spread through thousands? The answers lie not in military science, but in human nature. Men followed Cota because he didn't ask them to do anything he wouldn't do himself. They found courage because he showed them it was possible. His example spread because courage, like fear, is contagious. Chaplain George Wood, who landed with the 29th Division, reflected, "I saw men die that day, and I saw men transcend death." General Cota showed us that there are things worth dying for, and more importantly, things worth living for: duty, honour, the man beside you. He reminded us that we were not just soldiers but moral agents, capable of choosing courage over fear, action over paralysis, victory over defeat. Not all assessments of Cota's actions are uniformly positive. Some military analysts argue that better planning could have prevented the need for such desperate heroism. Critics point out that Cota's prediction of disaster raises questions about why preventive measures weren't taken. Colonel S.L.A. Marshall, the official Army historian, wrote, "While Cota's personal courage was beyond question, the need for a general officer to personally lead assault teams indicates a fundamental failure in planning and preparation." British military observer Brigadier David Belcom commented, "The American tendency to celebrate individual heroism sometimes obscures systematic failures." Omaha Beach required heroism because of intelligence failures, planning errors, and tactical mistakes. These criticisms have merit but miss the essential point. War is chaos, and no plan survives contact with the enemy. Cota's genius lay not in preventing disaster, but in recovering from it. He understood that adaptability, not perfection, wins battles. The most profound achievement at Omaha Beach wasn't tactical, but psychological. In the space of 3 hours, American soldiers went from accepting defeat to achieving victory. This mental shift, triggered by one man's example, proved more powerful than all the material advantages the Allies possessed. Private Harold Baumgarten, who began the day expecting to walk ashore unopposed, ended it as a combat veteran who had seized the heights above Omaha Beach. He wrote in his memoir, "I went into the water a boy. I came out of it a soldier. The beach was our crucible, and General Cota was the catalyst." The shift extended to American military culture itself. Before Omaha, the U.S. Army still carried traces of its citizen-soldier tradition, the belief that American spirit could overcome professional military skill. After Omaha, the Army understood that spirit required leadership, courage needed example, and victory demanded sacrifice. The success at Omaha Beach, salvaged from near disaster by Cota's leadership, had ramifications that shaped the 20th century. Without Omaha's success, the invasion could have failed entirely. German forces could have concentrated against other beaches. The Allies might have been thrown back into the sea. The war in Europe could have extended by years. Soviet forces might have conquered all of Germany. The Cold War's boundaries would have been different. Hundreds of thousands more might have died. With Omaha's success, the Normandy beachhead was secured. The liberation of France proceeded on schedule. Germany was forced to fight on 3 fronts. The war in Europe ended within 11 months. Western democracy was restored to Western Europe. The foundation for NATO was established. The post-war order that shaped the modern world was created. Historian Max Hastings concluded, "The margin between victory and defeat at Omaha was razor-thin." Cota's intervention tipped the balance. It is not hyperbole to say that the course of modern history pivoted on one man's courage on one morning. What the histories often omit is the personal cost to Cota himself. Leading from the front meant accepting that death was probable. He had a wife, Connie, waiting in England. He had a son, Norman Jr., serving as a pilot. He had every reason to preserve his life, yet he repeatedly risked it. After the war, Cota rarely spoke about D-Day. When pressed, he would say only, "I did what any officer should do, led his men." This modesty obscured the extraordinary nature of his actions. Not every officer could or would have done what he did. Cota retired from the army on June 30th, 1946, as a permanent Major General. He lived quietly until his death on October 4th, 1971, at age 78. He was buried with full military honours at West Point Cemetery, his grave marked by a simple stone that gives no hint of his extraordinary achievement. His widow, Connie, said after his death, "Dutch never considered himself a hero. He said the heroes were the ones who didn't come home, but I knew, we all knew, that without him, many more wouldn't have come home." The reversal of disaster into victory at Omaha Beach offers timeless lessons for military and civilian leaders. Lesson 1. Prepare for failure. Cota succeeded because he expected chaos and trained for it. Modern leaders should prepare not just for success, but for recovery from failure. Lesson 2. Lead from the front. In crisis, visible leadership matters more than perfect planning. People need to see courage to find their own. Lesson 3. Individual actions matter. One person's courage can catalyze change in thousands. Never underestimate the power of example. Lesson 4. Flexibility beats rigidity. The plan failed, but Cota's adaptability succeeded. In complex situations, flexibility is more valuable than detailed planning. Lesson 5. Character is decisive technology. Firepower and numbers all favoured the Allies, yet they nearly failed. Individual character, courage, determination, leadership, proved decisive. On June 6, 2014, the 70th anniversary of D-Day, the last gathering of Omaha Beach veterans took place. Fewer than 50 remained, all in their 90s. They stood on the beach where they had expected to die, looking out at peaceful waters where violence once reigned. The keynote speaker was James Shea, son of Jack Shea, Cota's aide. He read from his father's final letter, written before his death in 2011. "I am the last of Cota's staff, the last who remembers him as he was, not the legend, but the man. He was afraid that morning, just like the rest of us. His hands shook, his voice cracked. But he did his duty anyway. That's not legendary. That's human, and that's what makes it remarkable. He showed us that heroes aren't people without fear, they're people who act despite fear. Leaders aren't those who send others into danger, they're those who go first. Victory doesn't come from overwhelming force, it comes from refusing to accept defeat. Every generation faces its Omaha Beach, a moment when disaster threatens and leadership is required. The question is not whether such moments will come, but whether someone will stand up when they do. General Cota showed us that one person can make the difference. One person can turn disaster into victory. To future generations, remember this. When your moment comes, when disaster threatens and others hesitate, remember an old general who walked upright through machine gun fire, who led scared boys up an impossible bluff, who turned the worst defeat into the greatest victory. Remember that you too can be that person. You too can make the difference. The beach is peaceful now. Tourists come to see where history was made. But for those of us who were there, it will always be a place where we learned what we were capable of when someone showed us the way. General Cota didn't just save Omaha Beach. He saved us from ourselves, from our fear, from defeat. He showed us how to win when winning seemed impossible. That is his legacy, not just victory, but the knowledge that victory is possible even in the darkest hour, if someone has the courage to stand up and say, "Follow me." The final accounting of Omaha Beach tells the story in stark numbers. The assault force, 34,000 troops landed on D-Day, 43,000 by D+1, 100,000 by D+5. The casualties, approximately 2,400 on D-Day, 4,000 by end of June 6 to 7, 206,000 total Allied casualties in Normandy campaign. The achievement, 5 miles of beach secured, 10 square miles of territory seized D-Day, 1,500 square miles liberated by D+30, France liberated in 85 days. Cota's direct impact led first successful penetration at 7:50 a.m. 600-plus troops reached heights by 9 a.m. 5 exits opened by noon, entire beach secure by nightfall. Military historians estimate that without the breakthrough at Dog White, additional 5,000 to 10,000 casualties likely. Beach evacuation possible. Invasion potentially failed. War extended 1 to 2 years minimum. Additional 500,000 to 1 million deaths probable. Today, Dutch Cota's name adorns buildings at military installations across America. The Cota Bridge at Fort Benning spans Victory Pond. Cota Hall at West Point houses the Department of Military Instruction. Camp Cota in Vermont serves as a National Guard training center. But his true monument isn't built of stone or steel. It lives in the principle that leadership means going first, that courage can be contagious, that one person can reverse disaster into victory. Every young officer who learns to lead from the front carries forward Cota's legacy. Every soldier who finds courage in crisis channels his spirit. Every leader who stands up when others lie down follows his example. The Rangers still proclaim their motto, words spoken in desperation on a blood-soaked beach, now embraced as an eternal creed. The phrase captures the essence of Cota's achievement. When disaster threatens, someone must lead the way. On June 6, 1944, that someone was Norman Daniel Cota. The reversal of Omaha Beach from disaster to victory stands as one of history's most powerful examples of individual leadership changing the course of events. In 3 hours on June 6, 1944, Dutch Cota proved that battles are still won by men, not machines, that leadership is physical, not theoretical, that courage can spread through thousands if one person provides the spark. He arrived on a beach where defeat seemed certain and death probable. He found soldiers paralyzed by fear, pinned down by superior firepower, abandoned by failed planning. Through personal example, physical courage, and inspirational leadership, he galvanized beaten men into victorious soldiers. The story resonates because it speaks to universal truths about human nature. We all face moments when disaster threatens, when fear paralyzes, when defeat seems certain. Cota showed that such moments can be reversed through courage, leadership, and the willingness to act when action seems impossible. His actions, standing under fire, personally leading the assault, demonstrating rather than ordering, showed that leadership is about example, not authority. The veterans who survived Omaha Beach carried Cota's lessons through their lives. They built post-war America with the same determination they showed on the bluffs. They raised children with the values learned under fire. They created a world shaped by the principle that free people, properly led, can overcome any challenge. As the last veterans pass into history, their testimony remains. One person can make the difference. One act of courage can inspire thousands. One leader can change disaster into victory. This is the eternal lesson of Omaha Beach. Not that victory is inevitable, but that it is possible, even in the darkest hour, if someone has the courage to stand up and lead the way. General Norman Dutch Cota proved on June 6, 1944, that the margin between defeat and victory can be one person's courage at the decisive moment. He showed that leadership isn't about rank or age or safety. It's about being willing to go first when going first might mean dying. The beach where 2,400 Americans fell is now a place of pilgrimage, where visitors come to understand the price of freedom. They stand where Cota stood, look up at the bluffs he climbed, and marvel that anyone survived, much less succeeded. Some visitors cry, some salute. All leave understanding that they walk in freedom because one man refused to accept defeat on a desperate morning when everything went wrong. They understand that Dutch Cota didn't just save Omaha Beach. He proved that individuals matter, that leadership is real, that courage spreads like wildfire, and that disaster can become victory if someone has the courage to stand up and say, "Follow me." That is the ultimate lesson of June 6, 1944. When disaster strikes, when defeat threatens, when fear paralyzes, someone must lead the way. On that morning, on that beach, that someone was Dutch Cota. His reversal of disaster into victory stands as eternal proof that one person, at the right moment, with the right courage, can change everything.